Hello, I'm the 10-minute English teacher. Let's get you exam ready. Today we're thinking about an Inspector Calls by J.B Priestley, and I'm going to be teaching you about context. So J.B Priestley, a few things to note about him. He was a 20th century novelist and playwright. He had a BBC radio show during World War II that attracted around 16 million listeners on a Sunday night, a very popular, influential show. And he was a socialist and an egalitarian. So his writing and his radio show promoted his values and his political ideas and ideals. An egalitarian believes that everybody in society should have the same opportunities and be treated fairly and equally. And a socialist and socialism is maybe a little bit more complicated. I'll try and explain that in relation to the characters of the play now for you. So socialism, we've got Mr. Burling, who owns a factory. His factory employs workers and the factory makes profit. So if you want to learn some Marxist key terms very quickly, he is a symbol of the bourgeoisie. We've got the means of production, which is the factory, which makes capital and profit. And the people who do all the work are the proletariat. So we've got Eva Smith, Daisy Renton, being a symbol of the working classes, or you could call them the proletariat if you're going to use a Marxist key term to do so. So let's go back to the beginning now, just to keep us on track. We've got Mr. Burling. He owns a factory, and the factory employs workers, and the factory makes money. Now, in reality, and in today's society, what tends to be the case is the owners of companies and the bosses make profit, and the workers don't make as much money as they do. And if you look at the way that the world works, we've got some very, very wealthy, influential people. And the socialist would argue that society should be constructed so that that isn't so prevalent, or that isn't possible. So what a socialist might argue is that bosses should not earn huge amounts of profit. In fact, the profits that the factory makes should be shared more equally among the workers in the factory. But it's a broad church. Some people think that the people who work in the factory should get rid of their bosses, like Mr. Burling, altogether, that they should own the factory and that they should share all of the profits, seeing as they're the ones doing the work. So it's quite a broad church, socialism. Priestley, as a socialist, wanted society to be more fair, and he wanted people to see themselves as part of a collective, which is what the play is about in many ways. So in Inspector Calls, he chose to set the play in 1912. It's set in the Burling's dining room, and at the time the play is set, we're talking a short period just before the Titanic sinks. So Burling speaks about the Titanic in the play, and we're a couple of years away from the onset of World War I, which again is something that Burling speaks about. So you're going to hear in Inspector Calls Burling talking about the Titanic and about World War I. And the reason why that's interesting is because it means that every time he talks about workers and his factory and profits, he lacks credibility. The play was intended for an audience in 1946. So it's important to think a little bit about what had actually taken place during 1946. So we've got the end of World War II. So the soldiers are home, World War II is ended, and Britain is in need of being rebuilt. But it's also interesting to note that rich and poor had fought side by side in World War II. And then had returned to Britain. You've actually got quite a lot of poverty, and you've got things like rationing because of even though the war has ended, life hasn't quite gone back to normal for people of Britain. Everyone's subjected to rationing, so there's something that almost seems quite fair about that. It's almost like at the end of World War II, British society was able to look each other in the eye, and it was a real opportunity, as far as Priestley was concerned, for people to change the way that society worked. And as well as that, we just had the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So it's the dawning of the nuclear age. Now, Priestley's message in the play is we can't return to the past, which is why he sets that play in the past. And we must see ourselves as part of a collective and make society fairer, or else we're doomed. So that was his message for that audience. If we don't treat people fairly, it's a real opportunity now. We've got to rebuild Britain. Rich and poor have fought side by side, and we're subjected to the same things like rationing. It's time for us to look forward to a future that can't be like the past, because if it's going to be like the past, maybe there won't be a future for us to have at all. So here are some key questions for you to think about in order to take your revision further. Make sure you've made yourself a flashcard, or you've written these down on a piece of A4 paper, and you can answer these key questions confidently. You need this knowledge for the examination and to move on. So what did Priestley believe about society? What ideas did he have? The play is set in 1912. Why did Priestley choose to set his play at this time? What's the social historical context of the play? And what do you know about Britain in 1946? And what is Priestley's key message for his audience? Okay, check out the other videos on my channel. I'll continue to add content. Feel free to ask for something you'd like to see me cover in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share, and keep revising.